Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, go. All right, so this is what you guys cut off first. This is the pericardium, right? So everybody cut the pericardium off, and then you have to identify some external and internal structures on the heart. I'm doing their heart because their heart has some good vessels that I already identified. So it'll make it a little bit easier. Oh, this is why your cut is bad. You did it wrong. You're supposed to go from the article.
I have to see that in the video. But
yeah, I do. Okay, so first, you have to identify anterior and posterior, okay? So remember that you have the left ventricle is gonna go all the way to the apex. So this is the apex here. So this will be the left side of the heart, and this should be the right side of the heart. Okay, so left side and right side because the left side goes to the apex. Not all of them are gonna look perfectly like this. Can you bring me your dissection, Hannah, or that dissection? Okay, so some of them are not this obvious with the apex.
Oh, there's the pen in there.
Yeah, some of them are a little bit harder to tell. Like you have this little, just this little line right here. This almost looks like it could be going to the corner, but this is still the apex, so this is the left side. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it here for now. Okay, so when you identify the left side, that'll help you identify anterior versus posterior, right? Because everybody should know where their left is and where their right is. So if this is the left side of the animal and this is the right side of the animal, this means that you're looking at the anterior side. So then this structure right here that runs down the middle is your anterior interventricular sulcus. So this is separating the two ventricles, okay? So the anterior interventricular sulcus. That means that if you flip it around, you should have another line that separates the ventricles, and this is going to be your posterior interventricular sulcus. Okay, so this line. You also have two structures that kind of look like chewed bubble gum or like ear flaps here. And these are going to be your right and left auricles. Okay, so remember left side, left auricle. Right side, right auricle. Okay, you should be able to tell on a dissection if I have it laying down, you should be able to tell me which one is left and which one is right. You guys are doing this on the model as well. If you identify a structure that is paired on the left and the right, if only one is tagged, you have to specify if it's left or right, okay? Okay, so then you have a bunch of vessels on top, and we left these intact so that we'll be able to follow them into the chambers. So first we're going to look at the chambers, and then we'll follow those vessels, okay? So when you're looking at these chambers, you can tell right away that you have a muscular wall that is very, very thick on one side and it's much thinner on the other side. Okay? The reason for this is that one side of the heart is responsible for pumping blood into the systematic circulation, so that means it has to pump blood to the entire body. The other side is only responsible for pumping blood into the lungs, so it's not going to need as thick of muscle. So which side is going to pump to the systemic circulation? The left, right? So this is going to be your left ventricle and this is your right ventricle, okay? You can also see in here, we have our chordae tendineae here, chordae tendineae, however you want to say it to remember how to spell it. Make sure you don't leave out letters, spelling counts, right? These are attached to little muscles that are kind of like little bumps here. This is a good one right here. These are your papillary muscles. Okay? Papillary muscles attached to the chordae tendineae. And then the chordae tendineae on the other side are attached to a flap-like structure. And that flap-like structure is going to be one of your valves. Okay? So you have a valve in each chamber. You can see the one for the right side is buried a little deeper in here for this one, just because of how the cut is. Okay. When you look at this one, you can clearly see that you have chordae tendineae on each side that are attached to these flaps. Okay. On the right side, this has 3 distinct flaps that make up this valve. So we call this the tricuspid valve on the right side, or you can call it the right atrioventricular valve because it separates the atrium and the ventricle. Okay. On the left side, it has two flaps, so we call it the bicuspid valve or the left atrioventricular valve. Some people also call it the mitral valve. Okay, so the left one has 3 names, the right one has 2 names. I don't care which set you use, but if you call this the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve, then this one has to be called the tricuspid valve. Okay. If you call this the left atrioventricular valve, this has to be the right atrioventricular valve. You have to keep your name pairings the same. Okay, so that's those two valves. In this one, you can see that from the left ventricle here, you have these little flaps here. These are your semilunar valves. Okay, so you have one going into each of your major vessels. So one on the right side and one on the left side. The one on the left side is going to be your aortic semilunar valve, and this is the pulmonary semilunar valve that comes from the right side. Okay? The pulmonary semilunar valve is going to go into the pulmonary trunk. The aortic semilunar valve is going to go into the aorta. You can also see some other muscle structures for the heart. These muscles that are found in the ventricles, these are called trabeculae carneae. And then these convolutions in the auricle, these ones are called pectinate muscles. You can see them best on this side of the heart. Okay, so these are your pectinate muscles. Okay, so then, and then you have one more structure in the right ventricle. That is this structure, and this is the moderator band. Okay. The moderator band is basically going to act as an extra muscle that can help the ventricle contract because there's not as much muscle for the right side, so it's just going to add a little bit of help with closing the ventricle fully to pump the blood out. Okay, so those are those main structures, and then the hardest part for everybody is going to be the vessels. So the vessels, one of the easiest ways to determine what vessel you're looking at first is when you have the heart and you go to the anterior side. Here we go. When you go anterior on the heart, the very first vessel you see on the anterior side, the very first large vessel here, this is the pulmonary trunk. Okay? So the pulmonary trunk has 2 openings here because the pulmonary trunk will divide into the right and left pulmonary arteries. So this heart is a very good demonstration because they cut the arteries closer to the lungs. So you can see the right and left and how they come together to form your pulmonary trunk. Okay? The vessel that is going to be very large that is right behind it is going to be your aorta. And one thing we're going to do is on your practical, I will have these cut fully in half, and I'll have a pipe cleaner that is laying in the vessel that goes to the chamber. Okay, so then you'll have a pipe cleaner that goes all the way through, so you should see that this, if there was a pipe cleaner, it's going to the right ventricle. You should know that the vessel that leaves the right ventricle is going to be the pulmonary trunk. Okay, and then if you follow the aorta, you will end up in the, well, let's go this way. You will end up in the left ventricle. Okay? So this is one of the best ways to tell what vessel you guys are looking at, is what chamber it's going into. And then again, you have 2 vessels going into each of the atria that you need to know, and those just look like a mess. So they're oftentimes very hard to find. Where'd the other ones go? They were down here, right? Somewhere there. No. Okay, so let's start here. Okay, so remember, this is the trunk. So this is the right side of the heart. This is going into the right atrium. Going into the right atrium, you have two vessels. And I've put this through both of them so that you can see that there's one that is superior and one that is inferior. Okay, so this is the superior vena cava, and this is the inferior vena cava, both going into this right atrium. Okay. Oh, that's where they are. So then what vessels go into the left atrium? The left and right pulmonary veins. So here you have your left and right pulmonary veins, one on each side, left and right. There's actually many, but they have to cut it close to the heart, so you only see the one.
Are you going to ask us to specify left and right on that?
Possibly. It's only going out of one side. But I'll make sure that it's laid out correctly. Okay? If it's going through both, you would just say this is the pulmonary veins. Okay? So that should take you through all of the structures you need to know for the heart dissection.